March 23, 1944. Reich Ministry of Armaments and War Production, Berlin. The folder marked Geheim, nur für den Minister, secret for the minister only, lay unopened on Albert Speer's mahogany desk, its contents about to shatter the last illusions of the Third Reich's leadership. Inside, meticulously compiled by what remained of German intelligence services after the Abwehr's dissolution, were production figures that would fundamentally alter Nazi Germany's understanding of its position in the war. The disparity was so vast that I initially assumed our intelligence had made a decimal error. They had not. Through the tall windows of his ministry, Speer could see the bomb-damaged streets of Berlin, where workers cleared rubble from the latest Allied raid. German factories, despite his remarkable production increases, were on track to produce 39,807 aircraft in 1944, a number he had presented to Hitler with pride just weeks earlier. The Americans alone, not counting British or Soviet production, would manufacture 96,000, nearly 2.5 times that number. But the folder contained more than statistics. Intercepted communications, neutral country intelligence reports, and reconnaissance photographs revealed something that contradicted every assumption Nazi leadership had made about American industrial capacity. The United States wasn't straining to produce these aircraft. They were accomplishing it while simultaneously building ships, tanks, trucks, and ammunition in quantities that defied comprehension. The war's outcome was being determined not on battlefields, but in factory production reports that would soon force even the most fanatical Nazis to confront an immutable truth. They had challenged an industrial power they never truly understood. Albert Speer had become the miracle worker of German war production. Taking control of armaments production on February 8, 1942, after Fritz Tott's death in a mysterious plane crash, he had increased German war production by 300% despite Allied bombing. Hitler called him the genius of organization. Goebbels praised him as the man who made the impossible possible. At 39, he was the youngest minister in the Reich, architect-turned-armaments wizard, the technocrat who had seemingly defied economic laws. His reforms were revolutionary by German standards. He introduced single-shift specialized production, standardized components, and reduced the number of aircraft types from 42 to just 5 main models. He wrestled control from competing Nazi fiefdoms, streamlined bureaucracy, and implemented mass production techniques learned, ironically, from studying American automotive methods in the 1920s. By late 1943, Speer had reason for confidence. German ammunition production had increased 5-fold, tank production had quadrupled, aircraft production had tripled. Despite the combined bomber offensive reducing German cities to rubble, his dispersed production system kept weapons flowing to the Wehrmacht. He had proven that rational organization could overcome material disadvantages. But in early 1944, intelligence reports began arriving that challenged this confidence. The numbers seemed impossible, the claims absurd. America, German propaganda insisted, was a nation of jazz musicians and Hollywood actors, weakened by racial mixing and democratic inefficiency. How could such a nation produce weapons in quantities that dwarfed the combined output of the German Reich? The awakening began in January 1944, when Luftwaffe intelligence intercepted and decoded American production reports meant for Soviet allies through Lend-Lease shipments. General Adolf Galland, Inspector General of Fighter Forces, would later discuss these findings with Speer at a series of meetings throughout 1944. According to intelligence reports, the Americans claimed to have produced 9,113 aircraft in December 1943 alone, nearly matching Germany's entire quarterly production in a single month. Speer initially dismissed the figures as propaganda meant to demoralize German intelligence, but supporting evidence arrived from multiple sources: reconnaissance photographs from neutral Swedish businessmen showing endless rows of B-24 Liberators at Willow Run, Michigan. The Swedish source, an engineer who had toured the facility before America entered the war, provided detailed observations. The factory is 2/3 of a mile long, a quarter-mile wide, the report read. By April 1944, they achieved production of one completed 4-engine bomber every 63 minutes. They operate 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week. Simple arithmetic, nearly 650 bombers monthly from this single facility. Speer studied the photographs with a magnifying glass. The images showed not just completed aircraft, but the assembly process itself, a revolutionary production line where the plane moved through fixed stations rather than workers moving to stationary aircraft. It was Henry Ford's automotive revolution applied to aviation. With the Abwehr being absorbed into the SS in February 1944, Speer relied increasingly on alternative intelligence sources. The task of assessing American production fell to various departments within his ministry, working with what remained of military intelligence. Swiss businessmen who maintained commercial relationships with American companies provided production statistics from annual reports. Spanish diplomats in Washington forwarded American newspapers that brazenly published production figures. Portuguese merchants reported on American shipping observed in Atlantic ports. The most valuable intelligence came from Japanese naval attachés in Berlin. Throughout 1944, Japanese intelligence shared information gathered from their embassies in Argentina and Chile. American aircraft were arriving in massive quantities at South American training bases. 500 aircraft per month to Brazil alone, purely for training purposes. Swedish intelligence was particularly detailed. Sweden's ball-bearing giant SKF had factories in America and provided neutral Swedish executives with tours of American plants. These executives, maintaining Sweden's precarious neutrality, shared information with both sides. One report described the Pratt & Whitney engine plant in East Hartford, Connecticut. Production of 1,000 engines weekly. Testing facilities run continuously. The factory employs 40,000 workers, including 11,000 women. Parking lots contain approximately 15,000 automobiles, workers' personal vehicles. In his office in March 1944, Speer spread the intelligence reports across his conference table. His deputy for fighter production, Carl Otto Sauer, stood beside him, calculator in hand, verifying the figures. "Let us assume these numbers are exaggerated by 50% for propaganda purposes," Speer said. "Even then," Sauer replied, "they would be producing 48,000 aircraft annually, still more than our total production." But the evidence suggested no exaggeration. American newspapers, obtained through neutral embassies, openly published production statistics. The New York Times reported Boeing's B-29 program without censorship. Time magazine featured articles about Willow Run with production numbers. Life magazine published photographs of assembly lines with visible serial numbers that German intelligence could track. The revelation was profound. In Germany, production figures were state secrets. Workers signed death oaths. Factory locations were hidden. America published their production statistics in magazines sold at newsstands. The intelligence file on Willow Run became central to understanding American capacity. Built by Ford Motor Company in 1941, the facility represented everything German production was not. The main building covered 3.5 million square feet, larger than the entire Messerschmitt complex at Augsburg. Swedish engineer Per Jakobsson, who had toured Willow Run in late 1943, provided a detailed report. The facility employs 42,000 workers, including 35% women. Workers remain stationary while the aircraft moves past them on an automated conveyor system. Training time for new workers, 3 weeks average. By April 1944, production reaches 453 aircraft in 468 hours, one B-24 every 63 minutes. Speer compared this to German aircraft production. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, Germany's primary fighter, required 4,000 man-hours to produce. Workers were skilled craftsmen who assembled entire sections. Training time averaged 6 months. At Willow Run, each B-24 required approximately 1,225 man-hours in final assembly. Despite being a 4-engine bomber 5 times the weight of a Bf-109, it required less than one-third the labour. Throughout 1944, Speer attended regular conferences with Hitler at various headquarters. Each time he presented American production intelligence, Hitler's response remained consistent: denial and accusations of defeatism. At a May conference, Speer presented photographic evidence from Willow Run and production statistics from neutral sources. Hitler studied the materials briefly. "Propaganda," he declared. "The Americans wish us to believe these fantasies. No nation can produce aircraft like automobiles." "But that is precisely what they are doing," Speer argued. "They have applied automotive mass production to aircraft manufacturing." "These reports are Jewish lies spread by Roosevelt," Hitler insisted, ending the discussion. But other members of the leadership were beginning to accept reality. Field Marshal Erhard Milch, State Secretary in the Aviation Ministry, privately acknowledged to Speer, "The numbers are correct, aren't they?" "I believe they are conservative," Speer replied. "Then we have already lost." Back in Berlin, Speer conducted a detailed analysis of comparative production. According to the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, the numbers told an irrefutable story. German aircraft production, 1944. Peak month, July. 4,219 total aircraft. Peak for fighters, September. 3,375. Annual total, 39,807, all types. This included 25,285 fighters, 5,468 bombers, 9,054 other types. American aircraft production 1944. Monthly average 8,000. Annual total 96,000. Including approximately 16,000 4-engine bombers, 35,000 fighters, 45,000 trainers, transports and other types. But raw numbers only told part of the story. Each American B-24 Liberator possessed the striking power of 2 German medium bombers, while requiring proportionally less fuel, crew, and maintenance per ton of bombs delivered. The qualitative gap magnified the quantitative disparity. Spring 1944. Intelligence revealed another dimension of American superiority. Reports from Argentine sources detailed American aluminum production, 420,000 tons annually. German aluminum production, despite controlling Norwegian hydroelectric resources, reached only 245,000 tons. Oil statistics were even more sobering. American refineries produced 4.7 million barrels daily. Germany, dependent on synthetic fuel from coal, produced the equivalent of 124,000 barrels daily. The Americans consumed more fuel in training flights than the entire Luftwaffe used in combat operations. Japanese military attachés in Berlin shared a revealing observation. Your submarines sink American tankers carrying 100,000 barrels of oil. They don't reduce consumption. They simply order another tanker. This is not war as we understand it. It is industrial arithmetic. Beyond production numbers, intelligence revealed technological innovations German industry couldn't match. At Wright Field in Ohio, Americans tested aircraft engines in altitude chambers simulating conditions at 50,000 feet. Germany's highest altitude test facility reached only 30,000 feet. American factories used statistical quality control. Random sampling and statistical analysis replaced individual inspection, dramatically increasing production speed while maintaining quality. The Norden bomb site, analysed from crashed B-17s, demonstrated precision engineering that exceeded German capabilities in mass production. Dr. Ernst Heinkel, the aircraft designer, confided to associates, "We are artisans building aircraft. They are industrialists manufacturing them. We cannot compete with mathematics." Intelligence about American shipbuilding provided additional proof of industrial superiority. The United States built 2,710 Liberty ships between 1941 and 1945. While the famous SS Robert E. Peary had been built in 4 days, 15 hours as a publicity stunt, regular production averaged 42 days from keel laying to launch. By 1943 to 1944, American shipyards were launching ships at a rate approaching 3 every 2 days during peak periods. German U-boats operating in the Atlantic reported convoy after convoy of these vessels. The strategic implications were clear. America could replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. May 1944, intelligence about the Boeing B-29 Superfortress caused particular consternation. Swedish businessmen reported visiting Boeing plants where these superbombers were in production. The specifications seemed impossible. Wingspan, 141 feet 3 inches. Maximum weight, 140,000 pounds loaded. Bomb load, 20,000 pounds. Range, 3,700 miles. Pressurized cabin for high-altitude flight. Remote-controlled gun turrets. Production had begun in 1943, with 3,970 B-29s ultimately built across 4 facilities. Germany's most advanced bomber project, the Heinkel He 277, remained a paper design. The B-29 was in mass production, with hundreds already delivered to training units. When presented with photographic evidence, Goering reportedly declared, "Nobody can build such aircraft in quantity." But Galland and other realistic officers knew better. As Galland would write in his memoirs, this was not bluff, it was industrial reality. Captured American airmen inadvertently provided intelligence confirming production superiority. Their interrogations revealed another devastating gap: pilot training. American pilots received 250 to 400 hours of flight training before combat assignment. Primary training, 60 hours. Basic training, 70 hours. Advanced training, 50 to 75 hours. Transition training, 75 to 170 hours. German fighter pilots in 1944 entered combat with an average of 112 hours, reduced from 160 hours earlier in the year. By 1945, this would drop to just 50 hours. Fuel shortages meant many never flew their assigned aircraft until their first combat mission. Technical Sergeant William Barnes, a B-17 crew chief captured after his bomber was shot down, provided revealing information during interrogation. "We were losing about 60 bombers a month over Germany. Boeing alone was building 140 monthly. We had more bombers than trained crews." June 1944's D-Day invasion demonstrated American material superiority on an unprecedented scale. Over 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, 150,000 men in the first wave. Yet Hitler insisted this represented America's maximum effort, unsustainable. Speer knew better. Intelligence from Argentina reported American shipyards launching new Essex-class aircraft carriers regularly. Each carrier required 27,000 tons of steel and carried 90 to 100 aircraft. Germany's single aircraft carrier, Graf Zeppelin, remained incomplete after 6 years of construction. Dr. Karl Krauch, chairman of IG Farben's supervisory board, reported through Swiss contacts that Americans produced 800,000 tons of synthetic rubber annually versus Germany's 120,000 tons. "They have solved the butadiene production problem that limited our output. They share technology. We guard secrets. They multiply efficiency through cooperation." July 1944. Reconnaissance photographs of Detroit's industrial complex showed concentration exceeding the entire Ruhr Valley. Willow Run, 1,600 acres. Ford River Rouge, 2,000 acres. Chrysler Tank Arsenal, 1,100 acres. General Motors facilities, 5,000 plus acres combined. Photo interpreters identified hundreds of large factory buildings, thousands of vehicles in parking lots, dozens of power plants, and rail yards handling 1,000-plus freight cars daily. August 1944 marked both the peak of German aircraft production and Speer's complete acceptance of defeat's inevitability. A comprehensive intelligence summary presented the stark reality. American production, January to June 1944, 48,000 aircraft, on pace for 96,000 annually. Approximately 14,000 tanks, 300,000 plus military trucks, hundreds of naval vessels, 5.75 million tons of merchant shipping. German production, same period, 19,800 aircraft, 9,700 tanks and assault guns, 47,000 military trucks, 193 U-boats, negligible merchant shipping. American production was accelerating. German production under strategic bombing was beginning its decline. The oil campaign had reduced fuel production catastrophically. The transportation plan created bottlenecks that left finished weapons stranded at factories. By late 1944, fragmentary intelligence about a massive American project began reaching German intelligence. While the atomic nature remained secret, the industrial scale was evident. Reports described facilities consuming enormous amounts of electricity. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, was using 1/7 of all U.S. electrical production. Peak demand reached 298,800 kilowatts. The Americans were devoting resources equivalent to Germany's entire V-weapon program to a single project whose nature remained unknown. September 1944. Analysis revealed that the gulf between German and American production went beyond numbers. It was philosophical. American production emphasized simplification for mass production, interchangeability between manufacturers, statistical quality control, and worker specialization. German production emphasized complex designs showcasing engineering excellence, unique parts for each manufacturer, individual craftsmanship, and workers as skilled generalists. As Speer would later reflect, "We built aircraft as works of engineering art. They manufactured them as industrial products. Our Me-262 jet fighter was superior, but we could build only 20 monthly. They would have redesigned it for mass production and built 200 inches. By November 1944, even Goering could no longer deny American production superiority. The Battle of Leyte Gulf demonstrated American naval production. They deployed more aircraft carriers than Germany had destroyers. At a Luftwaffe conference, Galland presented sobering statistics. American fighters outnumbered Luftwaffe fighters 15-1 over Germany. American pilots arrived with 400 flight hours. German pilots had 50. American fighters had reliable engines lasting 400 hours between overhauls. German engines managed 25 hours. "We face not one air force but several," Galland explained. "The 8th Air Force alone has 3,000 heavy bombers. Each American Air Force is larger than our entire Luftwaffe." December 1944's Battle of the Bulge provided final proof. Despite achieving complete tactical surprise, German forces were overwhelmed by the American response. Within days, American forces moved 250,000 men, 50,000 vehicles, and 500,000 tons of supplies to contain the breakthrough. Captured American supply depots revealed abundance beyond German comprehension, more supplies in a single depot than entire German divisions possessed. January 1945 brought Speer's most comprehensive assessment. Swiss banking contacts provided American war bond advertisements openly stating production figures. "Your war bonds have built 300,317 aircraft, 1940 to 1945, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million trucks, 6,500 naval vessels, 2,710 Liberty ships." These numbers, published in magazines, would have been state secrets in Germany. America advertised them to encourage bond purchases. On January 30th, the anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, Speer attended what would be his last major conference, attempting to convince Hitler to seek terms. Mein Führer, we must face reality. The Americans produce in 1 month what we produce in a year. Hitler's response revealed complete detachment from reality. Wars are won by will, not production statistics. On March 18, 1945, Speer submitted a memorandum to Hitler arguing that Germany's economy would collapse within 4 to 8 weeks. The following day, March 19th, Hitler issued his infamous Nero Decree, ordering the destruction of all German infrastructure. Speer's subsequent response on March 29th argued against this destruction. The enemy's superiority in armaments and industrial capacity has reached proportions that render further resistance meaningless. The Americans can replace in weeks what we destroy. We cannot rebuild in decades. Hitler accused him of treason and defeatism, but Speer had moved beyond caring. The production statistics had convinced him that Germany's defeat was certain since at least mid-1944. April 1945, as American forces approached Berlin, intelligence continued arriving about American production. A captured Fortune magazine revealed the automobile industry's complete conversion to war production. The entire American automobile industry, which had produced 4.8 million vehicles in 1941, had converted to military production, manufacturing millions of military vehicles, thousands of aircraft, and tens of thousands of tanks. As the Third Reich collapsed, the production statistics told an irrefutable story. Total U.S. war production verified figures 300,317 military aircraft, 1940 to 1945, 86,000 tanks, 2.6 million military trucks, 639,000 jeeps, 257,000 artillery pieces, 2.6 million machine guns, 6,500 naval vessels, 2,710 Liberty ships. German war production, 95,000 aircraft, 1939 to 1945. 63,800 tanks and self-propelled guns, 345,000 military trucks, 61,000 artillery pieces, 1.2 million machine guns, 1,171 U-boats. The ratios were overwhelming, 3.2 to 1 in aircraft, 1.35 to 1 in tanks, despite Germany's longer production period, 7.5 to 1 in trucks. These figures excluded Lend-Lease production sent to Allies. After the war, the United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed that German intelligence had actually underestimated American production. The survey noted, German intelligence estimates of U.S. aircraft production for 1944 predicted only 22,440 aircraft. Actual production was 96,318, an underestimation of 330%. While Speer's memoirs Inside the Third Reich focused primarily on his own achievements and relationship with Hitler, in post-war interrogations and interviews, he acknowledged the overwhelming nature of American industrial capacity. In a 1970s interview, he reflected, By early 1944, I knew with certainty that Germany would lose the war. American production of 96,000 aircraft in 1944 was not a surge, it was sustainable indefinitely. Other German leaders corroborated this recognition. Field Marshal Erhard Milch testified, When I learned America produced 9,000 aircraft in a single month, I knew the war was lost. Admiral Karl Dönitz testified, When intelligence reported Americans building escort carriers faster than we could build submarines, I knew the Battle of the Atlantic was lost. General Adolf Galland wrote, Each American pilot we shot down was replaced by 2 more, better trained. We faced not an enemy, but an avalanche. American technological advantages multiplied their numerical superiority. The proximity fuse increased anti-aircraft effectiveness by 700%. America produced 22 million. Germany never developed the technology. American radar development proceeded on multiple tracks simultaneously. mass-producing thousands of units, while German radar remained handcrafted in hundreds. The turbocharger gave American fighters decisive altitude advantage. General Electric produced 300,000 during the war. German attempts to copy captured units failed. They lacked the metallurgy for mass production. The economic disparity made German victory impossible. In 1944, America's gross national product was $210 billion versus Germany's $45 billion. America devoted 45% to war production, Germany 65%. Yet American war production exceeded Germany's total GNP. As historians would later note, America could lose Germany's entire annual production in a single battle and continue fighting. They could afford waste that would have crippled the German economy. America trained 435,000 pilots during the war versus Germany's 57,000. By 1945, American pilots were engaging German pilots who had never fired their weapons in training. Luftwaffe General Johannes Steinhoff testified, "We sent children to fight professionals." It was not combat, but execution. The knowledge of American production superiority created a psychological crisis within German leadership that progressed through predictable stages: denial, rationalization, desperation, delusion, and finally acceptance. This progression affected military strategy, leading to increasingly desperate gambles that hastened defeat. The greatest irony was that American production achieved what German ideology claimed impossible. Racial integration and gender equality in industry proved more efficient than Aryan supremacy. American factories employed diverse workforces, voluntarily achieving more than German forced labor. In his final years, Speer reflected on the lesson. We confused military prowess with industrial power. We believed racial ideology could overcome numerical reality. We thought will could defeat production. Every assumption proved false. When I learned they produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, I knew not just that we would lose, but that we had already lost. The war continued for another year, but the outcome had already been determined. World War II was not won on the beaches of Normandy or in the ruins of Berlin. It was won in the factories of Detroit, the shipyards of California, the aircraft plants of Seattle. It was won by workers who never saw combat, but whose industrial might made victory inevitable. Germany challenged the world's greatest industrial power with ideology and courage. We learned that in modern warfare, production is strategy, logistics is tactics, and industrial capacity is victory. The Americans understood this from the beginning. We learned it too late. Speer's recognition of American production superiority marked the moment when rational German leadership understood the war's outcome was predetermined. The 96,000 aircraft produced in 1944 were not just machines, but manifestations of an industrial system achieving unprecedented efficiency. Each B-24 rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes represented the systematic superiority of democratic industrial organization over totalitarian control. The production war proved that in modern industrial warfare, the factory floor is as decisive as the battlefield. When Albert Speer saw that America produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, he saw the future, a future where German defeat was certain. The transformation of American industry from consumer goods to weapons of war represented the greatest concentration of industrial power in human history. Against this reality, the Third Reich never stood a chance. The story of Albert Speer's recognition of American production superiority is ultimately a testament to the decisive power of industrial democracy. In 1944, that nation was undeniably, overwhelmingly, and insurmountably the United States of America. The 96,000 aircraft produced that year were not just symbols of American might. They were the proof that totalitarian ambition would always fall before democratic industrial capacity.